welcome. All right, on today's episode of Alien Scientist, we're going to talk about some scientists, and mainly physicists. That's the specific type of science that I'm into here. But I'm going to start off today's episode with this article right here, and I'll share the link in the live chat. And I don't know if it will let me post it. It's too large of a link. I'll share the link. Let me just try to eliminate that code. See if that works for you. So this retired Lieutenant General Stephen Quast, he's been saying that fantastic technology exists that could transport a human anywhere on Earth within an hour. And he's kind of making a lot of brags about this, and there's a lot of talk that this is like the secret space program and all this business about what kind of capabilities they have when they just first discovered them and how they work. And there's a whole bunch of disinformation and confusion and stuff going on out there regarding this. This is something that I've been following and kept close with for the past 15 years. I work a regular job. I fund all my own research on my own. I got a degree in physics, a bachelor's degree in physics with a minor in math, just so I could learn more about this stuff and study it. And this is what I've dedicated like all my past 15 years of spare time and towards researching this subject. So I have a lot of interesting information to share with you. And I know many of you guys have heard of Bob Lazar. If you're here on this channel watching this video, you surely have heard of Bob Lazar. Everyone's heard of him by now. So I just wanted to, we'll get back to this at the end, but I'm going to mention, we're going to go through a list of 10 other physicists and talk about some of their classified research. Some of them are more well-known, so you probably know some of them. I changed the title because of that. This is to physicists whose names you should know rather than physicists' names you probably don't know, because some of these names you might know if you're into studying physics and physics history. So I want to go through a list and kind of talk about some of these individuals and teach you guys about some real physicists. We'll look into their work, their papers, what kind of information and knowledge that they shared with us, and then we'll compare their work and their curriculum vitae and whatnot, their history to Bob Lazar at the end. So let's just go through, and we'll start off on number 1 on the list, which is Yakov Frenkel. Very little known. I put him on the list because I came across him recently in some of my research into excitons and the optical effects within crystals. And he was one of the first physicists to kind of, introduce a lot of the terminology and nomenclature in condensed matter physics, which is understanding the basics of how light interacts with matter and the most fundamental principles. Especially within crystals. Very interesting line of work. A lot of the Frankel excitons were named after him. They're a certain type of exciton, which is whereby the electron is displaced within the lattice structure of a crystal through the action of electromagnetic waves hitting that crystal and interfering with that crystal. Tons of interesting work he's done. He's a Soviet physicist. I had never heard of this guy before, but apparently he knew Einstein and worked with Einstein and Schrodinger. So he's right up there with the birth of quantum mechanics, right in his timeline of where he was born, early 1900s. So he lived through the birth of quantum mechanics in the 1920s and did most of his probably best work during that time period. And so a very interesting history of work, and looking through his papers and reading, some of the insights that he had as far back as, like 100 years ago, basically 100 years ago, the insights that this guy had into what we're now, putting all the pieces together of it and the core details of condensed matter physics. So he's an interesting guy. Again, very little known. because his work is related to a lot of classified stuff that is classified now, and a lot of the research that does go on out at Area 51, which we'll get into later with some of the other physicists we mentioned. The next person I'm going to talk about is one of the two main people that got me into studying physics and wanting to learn more about physics, and that was Richard Feynman, reading his book, Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, and What Do You Care What Other People Think, among other books that he's written. A lot of them are copied from each other, and I, of course, have the Feynman lectures on physics, which is I have it on PDF as well, and very, very good way to learn physics from those books. He really does a good job of teaching it, although there's some things that are a little bit weird and wacky and that I've disagreed with or written stuff about, but such as the left-hand alien over the telephone thing. But anyways, I'll talk about that maybe in another video. I want to really get into his work in history. So this guy was recruited out of MIT at age 18. Really interesting story if you read his that Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman book, and where he talks about, you know, growing up in New York, getting accepted to MIT, going to MIT and being like this whiz kid there, and then getting whisked away to go work on classified projects at the Los Alamos National Laboratories in New Mexico, and where he worked under the other guy on our list, J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was the head of the Manhattan Project. Not based in Manhattan, it was out in New Mexico, but they detonated the first atomic bomb, and they developed the first atomic bomb, and there's a whole bunch of interesting history about that still is out there in Los Alamos, because that's kind of like the history that Los Alamos comes from, and Los Alamos is kind of this desert community that was just built up in this ghost town, essentially a western ghost town, that was just turned into this giant research hub for all the classified research for the government back in the 40s, or a good portion of it. There was another facility at Oak Ridge, and a couple actually here in Massachusetts. They're little known, one in Plainville, Mass. But anyways, lots of interesting history there with the classified research, and just learning about, you know, some stuff about the origins of this, going way back to the early days. If you want to learn about that, Richard Feynman and J. Robert Oppenheimer, two physicists you definitely should know and read up in their history and learn about. Now, interesting, there was a movie that came out back in 1989, right around the same exact time that Bob Lazar first came out with his story. It was called Fat Man and Little Boy, and it was a film that reenacts the whole Manhattan Project and kind of, you know, shows some of the things that happened with the Manhattan Project. And that's a very interesting film, and I encourage people who don't know the history or haven't seen that film to go and watch it. And learn about Fat Man and Little Boy, which were the two different types of bombs. One was a plutonium implosion bomb, and the other one was a uranium implosion bomb with a target and a gun that would shoot a uranium slug at a uranium target at high impact to cause. That's the Little Boy one. There's the shotgun design. So anyways, definitely some interesting physics history to learn about there and go through, going way back. You know, this is the stuff that's more well known. And yeah, John Wheeler is definitely has to be mentioned. He's not well talked about, but Wheeler Feynman diagrams and John Wheeler's work with Feynman should be considered the some of them definitely on your list. Of John Archibald Wheeler, yes, this is him. So yeah, look up this guy, John Archibald Wheeler. I should definitely add him to the list. Thank you for mentioning that in the chat. He's definitely a key piece of this whole puzzle, and he actually coined the term quantum foam, which is essential to a lot of this classified research that's been going on into wormholes and warp drives. He did a lot of the early research on quantum teleportation that's now being used in they built the first computer that sent the signal now. You saw that news. I gotta find that news article about the computer talk wirelessly. Where the heck was that? No, it was I can't. It talks about the quantum internet though, and talks all about this quantum internet. There's a whole new article about it. They just did an experiment that's like the birth of the quantum internet, and just I want people to know 2020 is going to be a massive year. If you're not already aware of everything that's gone on in the past 2 years, and despite of all this other nonsense that's kind of like in the way, and really in the physics community, the stuff I'm going to show you in this video too, with all the scientists that we're going to cover, is really connecting a lot of these pieces of the puzzle. So let's just get into it. I want to get to the next guy, Edward Mills Purcell. Edward Mills Purcell, very interesting guy. Again, he won a Nobel Prize and for his work on basically how light interacts with matter. You know. This in 1952 with Felix Bach. Very interesting career. He actually started, he's the guy that they recruited to start the research at Area 51. And he created Project Rainbow out at Area 51, which was the whole study into metamaterials that would eventually be coined metamaterials and be known as metamaterials. But basically, his whole thing was the interaction of light with different types of matter, and he was investigating all this stuff about crystals and a lot of the same stuff, nuclear magnetic resonance. That's what he won the Nobel Prize for. Basically, how to talk to atoms to see what are around them by aligning their spins and then measuring their relaxation times and signals that come off them, because they give these key signatures that will tell you like everything that's around them, and it's basically a way to talk to atoms to like and communicate through essentially quantum, what we now know as quantum entanglement. To basically it's the whole key to the puzzle. But this guy had it back in the day. They really knew very little about it, and they were still building the machinery and the equipment and getting up to date with that and the material science side of it, because the material science is something completely different. They're relying on materials that they found in nature and just looked at, which are weird enough, but they didn't have the kind of sol gel and microfilm and thin film depositing, vapor deposition and other cold spray and other techniques that we have nowadays for creating nanotechnology. So they didn't have where we are now. These people would be like certainly pleased to see where we're at now with it. But another guy next on the list, I don't want to spend too much time there. These guys are all like very important stuff. Edward Mills Purcell, definitely research, definitely something for those of you interested in the history to start putting together. And I'm starting to put more of these pieces together myself. I'm not quite ready to have enough to write a book yet on it, but eventually someday I'd like to. This is all really fascinating stuff. So next on the list is this guy Bernard Haisch. And Bernard Haisch I found because he's actually published quite a few papers with Hal Puthoff, who's next on the list for us to talk about. Hal Puthoff, another guy with an interesting career. But this guy has he's basically works for Lockheed Martin, this Bernard Haisch fellow, and Haisch has written all kinds of papers. Here's his whole curriculum vitae, and that's another thing I want to harp on is that if you have a physicist and you want to learn more about like what his work's really about, it's about reading his papers and his curriculum vitae, and the things that he's covered and talked about. Now I haven't published anything in like mainstream journals and stuff, but I cover all these things that are published in mainstream journals, and I kind of just I put that information out to the public, and kind of I'm more of a historian than an actual publishing physicist. So I want to get that clear. Some people are like, oh, you're a physicist, so what have you published and stuff? It's like, well, my publications have mostly been video and introducing people to these ideas and these topics and covering them and talking about them. So it's kind of I'm more of an intermediary than a someone out there But I've introduced a lot of new ideas to the field just talking, because I contact these scientists and I write letters to them and I talk to them. So I've influenced and done some behind the scenes work, I suppose, on sharing ideas and sharing information among these people, because I've been sort of a networker in that regard. So I wouldn't undervalue or understate, anyone's work, but we're all kind of in this together, and we take pieces from each other and what we can. And some people are much more, they have more time and more skills and more resources to be able to publish this kind of stuff and do this kind of work, which is great. The theoretical work is awesome on one side, but really boils down to experiments on the other side, and doing experiments to test these things, because really at the end of the day, theory is nice, but experiment really trumps theory in physics. As one of the most famous quotes from Richard Feynman: if it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. And that is the key to science. That's all it is. It's just testing it with experiment. If you can't, your theory could be beautiful and could be from the smartest person in the world and the most reputable, most respected source. But if it disagrees with an experiment, guess what? Nature wins, and you're wrong. You're an imperfect human, and your theories might not work. So, anyways, this whole stuff about the quantum inertia and the quantum vacuum and how it relates through the Casimir effect and local space-time warpings, extensions of the near field, and basically ways to warp the bubble of space-time and the fabric of space-time to create basically a bubble around your craft that acts like the fabric of space-time, so that you can slip through space-time with this bubble. Very interesting theories, lots of interesting stuff that's been written on it. Hal Puthoff and others led me to a lot of this research. Hal, this is a lecture people should check out. I think it's on Avalon Library, and this is his presentation that he gave, where he went over most of the technical information, and it's since been taken down off YouTube, and it's really hard to find. I don't know why this stuff became so difficult to find, but definitely something that people who are interested in this and learning more need to search and find out and look for. And if you need links, you can email me at thealienscientist@gmail.com. THE alienscientist, all one word, at gmail.com. And I'll send you links and information to this. Now, I'm still on the edge with some of this stuff, because it really seems like these guys could be disinformation, and I'm not sure what their motivations are. Some of the stuff they published, some of the stuff that they've come out with is a little sketchy and a little off the deep end, and not really well accepted in physics. In fact, all these, if you read all these Wikipedia articles covering all these guys, Hal Puthoff, his Wikipedia article is one of the most interesting, because it's like, it really just shows him to be like this fraud pseudoscientist, kind of outside guy, because he was a Scientologist, and he believed in remote viewing, all these abilities to see things through walls with your mind, to you can actually leave your body and then physically go and look at things through somehow, through your mind, that your mind had these superpowers, which allowed you to do this. And he actually had they did this whole study with the CIA DIA funded program at SRA International to investigate paranormal abilities with all these other people, including guys like Uri Geller, Ingo Swann, and all this. I'm doing a live stream. Can I give me 10 minutes? Can you give me 10 minutes?
Nico wants to say hi.
Hi, buddy. Come say hi. Who's the birthday boy? Say hi.
Yeah.
What you doing? Say hi. All right, guys. Give me 10 minutes, and I'll wrap this up. I'm only halfway through my list. In any case, it almost seems like if you were going to pick somebody, you'd want someone that could be easily discredited. If you were going to pick someone to bring into this top secret program to really build reverse engineer flying saucers and this warp drive technology, that you'd probably hire somebody like this, who could be easily discredited. So it kind of makes sense that he was brought into this whole scene, but I don't agree with some of this stuff I just don't see the evidence for the remote viewing stuff and all this psychic phenomenon. I think it's a bunch of woo, personally. And it's real interesting that Jack Sarfatti, who's next on our list, kind of copies some of this idea, the Froelich condensates he's been talking about in his recent, he recently did a workshop at Cortona, Italy, in November, and had a 5-part or 6-part series posted up that he linked to on Twitter and other sites if you follow him. This is kind of private, so it hasn't had a lot of views and stuff, but I've watched it and kind of taken notes on this stuff, and I don't agree with like the whole idea of this consciousness and Froelich condensates somehow being involved. I just see it as being more mechanical, and I don't see the experimental evidence for that, and I just like to see more experiments done with regards to this technology and how it works, and this whole idea of pixelation and needing a quantum computer to transfer all the pixels and warp the space-time with this quantum computing technology. I think all of that can be done instantly and optically if you have the right optics and the right materials. So I disagree with some of his conclusions and statements there, but it's very interesting stuff that's going on. On the list, I think we have James Woodward. Did I get into? I'll go back to Kimble, because that gets into this more advanced stuff of the real. So James Woodward. James Woodward's. There's this thing called the Woodward effect or the Mach effect, and I just give me a second. I want to turn my phone off the volume because I'm getting blown up. So James Woodward, very interesting guy. He's put on this conference in California and elsewhere for like every year. He puts on this whole like colloquium where he gets all these all the top propulsion physicists go to this, like all the people who are the big into propulsion and alternative propulsion, like propellantless propulsion, anti-gravity. All the anti-gravity physics people go to this conference and go to this stuff and follow this, and all the top people anyway, the people that aren't just doing it in their basement or their garage, the people that are really into the top end of this stuff. So a lot of these, there's also a lot of the STAFE 2 conference and the SpaceIF conference that were two other conferences where a lot of papers get presented. DARPA guys go there and actually recruit out of those kind of conferences. It's similar to what DARPA does with their calls for papers when they ask people to submit a bunch of papers for ideas, and then they invite the ones that they like to come present, and the ones that they like, they invite and secretly go behind the scenes and say, hey, do you want to come work on this for 6 months and see what comes out of it? It's all going to be classified, and all the results belong to us, but we'll pay you good money and take real good care of you, and and that kind of stuff happens. That's where the stuff really happens, and that where if you're interested in this stuff and learning the real shit, then that's where you're going to look. Is look through all that stuff. So I have some inside sources into some of these conferences that have been doing this a while, and they've kind of given me some insights and inside information. And I'm meeting more of these people as I get more involved in this community, and because I'm passionate about what I'm doing here and getting all the pieces and putting them together. So I'm meeting more and more of these people. They're seeing that my passion and reaching out to me and being like, look, let's get you real information and start thinking rationally about this, and let's put all the pieces on the table and make sure we have all the pieces and we're putting them all together the right way, and figuring out which are the bad pieces, which pieces might not fit or might be being put out there on purpose and why, and which pieces are the good pieces, and what pieces aren't being talked about by those other groups that are key, essential pieces to this whole puzzle. So I want to focus on that, and that brings us to our next couple people on the list. Viktor Podolskiy. Apparently this guy's at UMass Lowell. I didn't even know it. He's at the physics department at UMass Lowell, which means I can drive to him within an hour. So I'm gonna try and hook up with this dude and see if we can't get him on in it for an interview and check out some of his work. Because if you look up left-handed metamaterials and some of these optical experiments with polaritons and stuff, Viktor Podolskiy comes up right in the top with the Casimir effect and these thin film linings with it's like a basically a piece of glass between two mirrors that's an atom thick, and you bounce the waves inside that cavity, and it creates these crazy effects where you're producing these negative mass particles. Yes, negative mass particles, I think, what are called polaritons, are a key, essential piece of this puzzle. And that's I'm so upset with groups like TTSA and who is Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff is TTSA, and why he's talking about all this remote viewing and frolic condensate stuff. These guys are pushing, rather than really getting into this squeezed light stuff. Which the more I'm learning about this, the more it's led me to understanding the history of squeezed light generation. It's really interesting. 30 years of squeezed light generation is this article, and I linked to it in the links there and the sources. But you look through the history of squeezed light, and what happens with squeezed light is that you're creating antimatter. You're creating brief moments of antimatter through what are called, if you look up Dirac holes or Dirac cones, right? Dirac cone. So they have these graphs, and they show like the squeezed states of these quantum states of light or of light. It's basically light in the vacuum. It's the vacuum. You're squeezing the vacuum in a certain way, and they map it out with these graphs, and it's shown in this article right here with these things. So these are like the Dirac holes or the Dirac cones. When you're squeezing these states, you're pushing them so that they polarize, and you're creating a polarity or polarization, where this side doesn't go, it stays 0, but this one oscillates between 2 and -1, and you get it to bounce between matter and antimatter of these oscillations. And if you do it fast enough, you can trick the actual fabric of space-time into thinking it sees just antimatter or just a negative mass rather than positive mass, I guess. So it's about this high frequency time shift, which does relate to this terahertz gap stuff, I suppose. If that's where that's the kind of high frequency you need to match the fabric of space-time, is it within this terahertz gap that supposedly that's very hard part of the spectrum to reach. But I think we can do it through these magnetron or metamaterials, free electron lasers or polariton lasers, using polariton lasers, which work on magnetons and exciton-polariton pairs. And that's all nanotechnology, which is very interesting stuff. There's an article on closing the terahertz gap, and it talks about the types of sensors and the types of abilities we'll have once we do that. We're able to reach that level of technology. But I think we're really close, if not there already. Considering this whole history of the squeezed light, it goes back to 1985, which is really interesting, because that's right before Bob Lazar kind of came out with the whole element 115 story, which we think was probably disinformation to trick the Russians into researching that stuff. But this is the real deal that I believe that they were hiding. This is like the real research that I believe that they were trying to cover up or trying to steer people away from, and the public is steered away from, because we went to that conference. If you ask anyone about anti-gravity, or what's the physics of anti-gravity, they all say element 115. It's like mass brainwashing almost, and it's crazy, because right around the same time, this squeeze quantum state stuff appears to be what they were really trying to cover up and hide. There's so much classified research, and all the scientists that have gotten into this or done this, they all it's interesting. There's so much history to this, though, with the scientists, and I want to learn more. I'm trying not to get too conspiratorial about all this. Maybe it's just was overlooked on purpose, not on purpose, just overlooked for whatever reasons, because string theory and all this other stuff was made much more interesting. But I really want to talk to the scientists who are involved in this and get their stories and learn more about this, because what I'm learning about negative energy states. So negative mass, if you go negative mass particles, type in negative mass, polariton. Polariton, negative mass, there it is. So this is the article you'll find. It's from the University of Rochester. And this came out about the negative mass, that they created this polariton laser and this negative mass particle, and it came out in January of 2018. But according to this, and this guy who is in the field, works in the field, the scientist who works in the field, Ulrik Andersen, who wrote this 30-year history, this stuff was discovered in 1985. So why is it not coming out until 2018? Is this something that much? I mean, it's a little bit different. Again, creating a polariton laser versus just squeezing light, but it almost seems like there's and it's interesting that it comes out of the same university, because the guy who first discovered this, who's next on our and last on our list, this Jeff Kimble fellow, who's Caltech professor. He's William L. Valentine professor of physics at Caltech. He's like the top friggin' head physicist at Caltech. And so, really interesting guy. And can you guys hear me all right? My voice isn't too low. Yeah, all right. Someone said I hate that when people I can't hear nothing. It's like, check your speakers, dude. Like, I can see my stuff's working right here. Right there. That bar means you can hear me. You should be able to hear me. So anyways, Kimble went to school. It says right here, he got his master's and doctorate degree from the University of Rochester, right where this same research was being done. So these guys, definitely some interesting stuff going on here on the East Coast, and I want to get more in touch with people at these universities and learn more about it, talk to them, and get more information, whatever we can find publicly, because it's really about these Dirac cones and these Dirac holes, which it's crazy, because someone talked about this to me like 10 years ago, and I did a little bit of research into it, but I didn't quite get the whole thing. I didn't get all of it and start seeing like the significance until this past year, when just so much stuff's come out. But really, it's the Hal Puthoff and like Jack Sarfatti and these guys that led me to a lot of this stuff. You know what I mean? With TTSA coming out with their whole thing, and doing all the research that I started doing into his history. And really, this is what I do when you go on this site, ARXIV. This is a great site, and you can just search for a physicist's name. Search for Bernard Haisch or any of these names that we said, right? So you can search Bob Lazar on there and see if you can find Bob Lazar's papers and read his. But it turns out that you can't find anything by Bob Lazar. There's nothing. Produces no results when you search Robert Lazar, Bob Lazar. So this guy hasn't published any physics papers that I can find, There's nothing that's by him that I see. And element 115 stuff reveals like the same thing. You can't find, maybe it's all super classified, or they took it all down and made it all disappear, but that doesn't make much sense, because why can I find all this stuff on Purcell and Project Rainbow and all this optics physics that's really related to classified stuff like invisibility and all that research? But you can find all that stuff because it's real science. And if you're studying real science, you're not going to be misled. Here's a Robert Lazar. Who's this guy? When was this published? 2017. I doubt it's the same Bob Lazar. This is like a math paper. Group theory. Yeah. Yeah, but anyways, that's my conclusions on Bob Lazar. You look for all, I've done like 15 years of research into that guy, Bob Lazar, and I put a website together on all the stuff that I found because I was able to track down a lot of his sources, and they're not from scientific journals, they're not from scientific, like the scientific and academic realm at all. They're actually from books, magazines, movies, TV shows, and I put all this stuff together, including the article from Scientific American that talked all about element 115. I showed the timeline. You can check this Bob Lazar timeline. Has a whole timeline on this guy Tom Hood's website where it goes. I do all the stuff on element 115. Show how it was in chemistry books published back in the 70s. You know, I show it from books from 1977. Here we have the Sea of Instability in this book right here, chemistry and nuclear particle physics book. So I've done all like the real research to like put the pieces together. I talk about Fat Man and Little Boy. You watch in that movie, they have this thing called the Demon Core, and it looks exactly like his element 115 reactor. This is the new one that they had to build, the new setup they had to build to test the criticality and the crit experiments that they were doing with the Demon Core, and it looks just like the element 115 reactor with this, you can see where Bob borrowed the hand scanners from. Came out in these. It was also in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right in that movie. Got the sports model and Billy Meyer's craft comparisons, and I showed the differences and the similarities in real time with like the actual measurements. Michael Schratt did these drawings and has the actual dimensions and measurements on both craft to show kind of like the elements that he borrowed from other UFO hoaxers and lore of the past, like this guy George Adamski, who used this dentist's lamp with 3 light bulbs in it, and said that the light bulbs were these gravity emitters for these kind of Hannibal craft and stuff. Although it's interesting, the Nazi Bell stuff, that rotating mercury plasma, and the Nazi Bell stuff. Oh, this was another key. This is Bombshell. This aired in 1988. It's a TV specials on UFOs, and it's called UFOs and the Government Bible. It talks about the Janet flights. It talks about the small Zeta Reticulum grays, and tons of stuff that was in Bob Lazar's story. Like, it shows he just copied all this stuff from stuff that was available at the time and crafted this master story that's just become part of the legend. And he's not a real physicist. He has no papers published. He doesn't have an educational background. Like, everything we've researched about his educational background says that he didn't go to those schools. He just made up the whole thing, literally. And I don't know, people just can't like believe that he could have made up that much stuff. And it's like, dude, you haven't met some people. You haven't met like really smart criminals. Like, I'm sorry, until you've met like really smart criminals, then you can't really understand the mind of someone like this. Anyways, yeah, why would the top physicist quit his job after leaving his job to go out and publicly? He started a brothel and was running a prostitution ring in Las Vegas, which he got busted for while he was running around with George Knapp selling UFO stories. So, looking at this guy's history, Bob Lazar is not the real deal. He's not a real physicist, and I'm pretty sure it's government disinformation that's being spread and put out by disinformation agents to hide people from the real physics and the real physicists and the real scientists and how to do real research. Anyways, yeah, this is a good tool for you to use, is ARXIV at Cornell University, and just search the database and read papers and find real physicists. And there's enough real physics that I've shown you just in the physics and the names that I've dropped for you in this video that you should have quite a bit of research ahead of you, and quite a lot of reading to do to catch up. So, yeah. All I have to say is that, yeah, he's science fiction, dude. I'm sorry to say that. Like, he's real interesting and it's super awesome when you're young and first getting into this and know nothing. But as you become more educated and you really go and get a degree in physics and go ask physics professors to really, and learn this stuff with an open mind, you will come to these same conclusions. At least I hope. you know, stick your head in the sand and say, you know, Bob Lazar is the only one I'm going to listen to, and everyone else, all these other people are all liars, and whatever crazy fantasy you want to make up in your own head because you don't have the intelligence to understand some of this stuff. I think people, you can understand this stuff. It really takes a lot of time and practice, and a lot of core fundamentals, and starting at the beginnings of you know, why they start with algebra and physics and then break you in with calculus and teach you more from there. But yeah, I encourage people who are just getting into this to really really look into the names of the physicists that I've shown you, read their biographies and their books and get their perspectives, and then compare those to Bob Lazar. You know, do some real digging and research on some real scientists involved with some real classified stuff, and then compare kind of them to people like Bob Lazar, and I think you'll be much better for it, a better researcher, and a much better knowledgeable person at the end of that. So anyways, I'm gonna go make some breakfast and feed my kid and hang out with the family and all that good stuff. And I gotta do a job this afternoon, quick little short job. John Lear was the friggin', he's a total nutcase now, and I think that was done to him through years of infiltration. But it's really interesting. John was revealing tons of stuff about Area 51 back in 1989. He was also going to run for senator, and probably would have won in Las Vegas and Nevada. And he was promising everyone that he was going to dig into Area 51 and reveal all the secrets and blow that place up. And then along came Bob Lazar, and it took him on that whole other direction. And you know, 10 years later, he's addicted to opiates and all these other drugs and all this other crazy stuff that went on in his life. And now he's selling his house and all his collection of books and everything. And his just life is spun out. Like he's crazy, talking about people living on the sun and the moon and all these every conspiracy theory is true. All of them are true. You know. So and then the whole CIA, when he came out with as the CIA pilot with the no plane stuff, and how the media and the disinformation machine just took that and ran with it. It was all you saw for like forever, and it was like the biggest crap disinformation about 9/11 I've ever seen. Yeah, pretty ridiculous. So I wouldn't doubt that. You know, I also have a theory that maybe Bob Lazar was recruited specifically to target John Lear, that John Lear was the target with that whole thing. Because if you look through the history on look at John Lear, right before Bob Lazar, all the stuff that he did with George Knapp, like in the year before Bob Lazar came out, it's all the same information, all the same material. John was kind of blowing up, but not really getting huge, but getting kind of popular. But they didn't really blow up until they had Bob Lazar as the vehicle to sell it all. So like they basically took everything that John already believed, and this Bob Lazar guy just came up with this. And I don't know, it's so perfect the way it all comes together with this story. It just seems like there's some other hand of counterintelligence playing some cards here, especially with it's still around after 30 years and so popular and so manifest, so ingrained in people's heads. Oh, element 115 is the only secret to anti-gravity. They know nothing about Dirac cones and negative mass and negative particles. Okay, that's real shit. Not element 115. You can create it with lasers by squeezing the light. You don't need a freaking giant particle accelerator the size of a galaxy. So I don't know. I think needs to have more information. And anyways, I have some videos on 9/11 where I go into like the details and name names and talk about the real people. I don't just say, oh, it was Mossad or the CIA or the government. You know, I name the individuals and the projects and the stuff that, like, I give you real, tangible, researchable, FOIA-able details. So that's all I have to say. My 9/11 work, you know, speaks for itself, and I hope that my work into this can be just as good. Although some of the people that I've met through my research are on a whole another level of knowledge and understanding of crazy ass shit that goes on with physics research and classified programs. well, not really classified, but just like the, all the stuff that it's the smart people that they don't even want to talk about it because it's like people don't, it's dangerous, man. Some of this technology is like, when I learn about it, I'm like, oh well, I can't talk about that, but I can talk about this. I can talk about, you know, not going to give you directions on how to build a doomsday device to kill the planet. You know what I mean? But this is pretty cool stuff, man. And I guarantee you that there's a race going on to figure it out behind the scenes. Someone already figured it out, and I think these billionaires are all about it and trying to depopulate the planet so they can be the only ones to have it. So get ready for some crazy shit in 2022 because these motherfuckers are going down. I swear it's almost like a cabal that knows all this information, has kept it through thousands of years and generations to these like Templars or these ancient secret societies that just are keeping us as prisoners on this planet, and they don't want this. They want to keep us here and controlled under this massive freaking conspiracy control system that they've created for the entire planet to live under. This money system, monetary greed, and everything. And we really are going to have to fight to bring this technology out and to crush this control grid and to fight the people who want to depopulate the planet, keep all this for themselves. Because I really feel like that's what's going on right now. It just seems like it more and more each day. But in any case, dude, Dan Winter is not someone you want to listen to, dude. That dude's a nutcase. All right. Same with Marco Rodin. Like, please, if you guys are like getting into Dan Winter and Marco Rodin, like, you need different mathematicians and different math to study, guys. Sorry, it's not why. I know a lot of people are on that vibe, dude. They're looking for that information on that level, but those guys are frauds, dude. I sat with Marco Rodin all night in 2009 and watched him, talk to a room full of people, and I threw a couple questions his way. That dude knows nothing about math. He's a fraud. Dan Winter, that guy he's a word salad, man. He makes up words, dude, and he's kind of lost in his own LSD-induced delusions, I feel. Yeah, but there's a lot of people like Bob Lazar who made up the story, and then guys that came around, and S4 became part of the history and became part of the literature, and then guys like Dan Burish came along and copied it and added to it, and then, so everyone's copying and fraud, like all these frauds and fake SPP whistleblowers are all like copying from one another and regurgitating the same crap and bullshit, and then adding a little bit of more bullshit to the story that can't ever be debunked or looked into. And it's all just a big game to sell money into these LARPs to create a fantasy world for them to live in real time, and not feel so bad about the fact that they spent the last 30 years or 20 years, doing nothing with their lives, absolutely nothing. And they had to make up this story about the 20 and back program to fill in the holes. That's sad. It's really sad what's going on right now and how many people are giving these frauds money to do nothing for them but lie to them and sell them bullshit. It's like, dude, we need to do experiments. I'm getting a lab together. I want to show you guys. We got a new video coming out on Falcon Space with some of the more recent high voltage experiments into the Biefeld-Brown effect. I think we've killed that one officially. It's old. It's not the way this shit works at all. It might have some insights related to these, production of Dirac cones and Dirac points and stuff. But I think that's the real physics that we need to get into. And if I have the funding this next year and we get the right stuff together, man, we're gonna build a warp drive, and we're gonna interview the people that are doing it and the people the real scientists that know what's going on. And I'm not gonna bother wasting my time with any of these frauds, any of these fraud physicists or fraud scientists. That guy with the Kesh Foundation, that dude's just taking people's money and selling them crap, dude. It's like, Kesh Foundation, send me money, and we have very good website and awesome technology. I haven't seen crap from this dude. He's just like, I don't know what the hell this dude's all about, but he's got like a big, huge, growing following, man, and it's just, I don't know what to do, man. I can't believe the universe could be this stupid to let consciousness, just shoot itself in the foot. But I haven't seen crap from those people in terms of, anything. They've gotten a massive following and a massive funding, in these other countries and everything and what they're doing, but I haven't seen anything like legit come out of them with the amount of money they're doing, and the amount of money they're getting. But yeah, the one who, the people who are in the top of the feeds, they're not shadow banned. The real truthers get shadow banned. They get like their counts snipped, and they, like right now it says I have 48 viewers. I probably have 100 people, 200 people watching this right now, especially with the amount of people that are commenting on this, and the amount of different names I see in here, but they'll snip this and make it look and tell me only 45 people are watching you. So it kind of like discourages you not to, do anything. And meanwhile, they promote the hell out of these other people. So like even people that aren't subscribed to them, that are subscribed to similar interested stuff, will see their stuff and be like, get plugged to that. So it's like David Wilcox goes live with Edge of Wonder, man. It's like they get 1,000 people on here because it's being, it's being sent to more people. Me, it's like they can get it. They know I have 93,000 subscribers, and they can't really get away with not sending it to anyone. So some of these people are really into like checking up on this stuff, and they don't want it to be known. So if you're looking for it, they're gonna let you see it and find it. But like it's crazy. It's crazy what goes on, dude. And the way they really work on shadow banning you, they don't have to fucking. Look, they don't have to come in and knock me out with some space laser friggin' device, a consciousness thing, pour alcohol down my throat, and put me in a freaking cruiser and have me wake up in front of with a cop there, like Secure Team 10 claims happened. Tyler Glockner, that's literally what he's claiming, like something like that happened. Or I just fell asleep and I woke up and I was in my fucking car drunk. Like, dude, come on, bro. Just drink and stay home. Don't be driving around or get an Uber. You got enough fucking money, dude. Look how many subscribers you make and how much, money you got, bro. It's like, it's crazy. I don't believe that for a second. I think it's crazy how many people are like, oh, you don't know what the government's capable of. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. It's like, dude, he doesn't have any bruises on him. He got beat up by all these guards and beaten, dude. Like, I'd be showing my bruises off. I'd be like, it was officer, blah, 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 badge number, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, come on. Like, anyone who's been there and knows, like, anything about this, like, and is intelligent knows this dude's lying. Like, this dude's full of it. You know what I mean? Like, or he's just that stupid that he deserves to get this stuff. I don't know, man. Like, if you can't like know who's beating you, know what they look like, get their name and it just doesn't make any sense why the local police would be any the people who work at guys who work at a correction officer. The guy's probably interested in the football game. He doesn't give a fuck about UFOs or any of the crap you're saying. Like honestly. I don't know, it's crazy, dude. People are going off on this, and then they're saying, oh, he's a garbage person as well, dude. Like, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, dude. I know people, like, it happens that the cops get called in a domestic situation, and they just arrest the guy, and they throw charges on him. Dude. It happens. I know a guy he stabbed him. What did he stabbed himself in the leg to get away from, like his girlfriend or something. She wouldn't let him leave the house, and she stabbed him, and like he called the cops and they came and arrested him. Even though she stabbed him in the leg, they said he did it to himself or something, and they arrested him. Like, this shit that's happened, dude. Like, you don't know. Like, we give him the benefit of the doubt on some of this stuff, but like this story about the DUI, like that's junk, dude. Tyler, I'm sorry. That was just funny, dude. Like, no jury in the world is gonna believe that story, and like, I'm sorry that you know, maybe you're drinking too much because you're depressed because what happened with your family and the loss of family members and stuff. But dude, stop making hoax UFO videos, dude. You got a huge channel and a huge following, dude. Like, it's like almost like karma coming back to bite you in your ass, dude. Like, I really feel like, and a lot of what's happening with these people, like David Wilcox bought that, you know, $1.3 million mansion. He's got, you know, a mortgage on it. It's like $3 grand a month, and he can't pay it anymore. So he's trying to sell more. He's get back on Edge of Wonder, and coming out of, you know, not doing anything for a whole year to sell more, you know, hope. And you know, hope porn basically is all he sells. He's harped on that QAnon movement, which I think is, you know, Russian or something. It's got to be disinformation from somewhere. I don't believe a word of that QAnon crap. I think it's a big kind of another big bandwagon attempt to group all conspiracies together on this under this right-wing umbrella. It's a real far-right it just takes all the, it's a far-right conspiracy theory. It's got all these people wrapped around Donald Trump's penis, thinking that he's doing all this good stuff to fight the corruption when he's really a huge part of it. You're just blind to it, and this kind of just blames everything on the left and the Democratic Party. It's all Obama and Clinton's fault. You know, really, it just blames this whole QAnon business. It doesn't talk about Bush. It doesn't talk about Cheney. It doesn't talk about any of the crap that went on in the Bush administration. Right when I was getting into all this stuff, you know what I mean? It's just sad that it just ignores so much history. Yeah, Jordan Sather, man, that he thinks he knows all this stuff about anti-gravity, but he's sharing stuff that was debunked on Black Vault back in 2005. It's fucking sad. Dude knows nothing, and he needs to go and get an education in physics and talk to some real scientists, man. Like, it just it's pretty crazy. But anyways, yeah, that QAnon stuff, dude.
What are you doing? Want some breakfast, Nana? Yeah.
You made me breakfast?
Eat it.
Oh, thank you.
Shut up.
I love you. All right, guys. Oh, I'm starving and I got some good breakfast, so I'm gonna go and eat. I'll let you guys argue over this with me on Twitter and in the comments. And yeah, man, all these puffed up larps, dude, they all need to go down. And it's time to start like focusing on real science and doing these experiments and getting with our. So we got Falcon Space Program. And check us out on YouTube. We're going to be doing an update video soon, and we got some equipment and some stuff going on, and we're growing our team of scientists. So if you want to get involved, you know, reach out, man, and help us out, because we're doing it. 2020. I want to interview so many scientists and get so much information out. It's not even funny. It's time, bro. It's time. Are you guys pumped? Because I'm pumped. Yeah, dude. The Bush administration was crazy. It was like Enron. Oh, you guys got to see Enron. The smartest guys in the room. Watch this documentary, Enron, the smartest guys in the room. All right. Then know that all the history of the Enron investigation and all that files and everything was in Building 7 of the World Trade Center that went down on 9/11. This basically, they used Enron to rip off this huge financial scam, used all the money to fund Bush's presidential race to get him elected president, and then as soon as he was elected president, they did 9/11, destroyed all the evidence of Enron and all this other stuff. It's a huge piece of the 9/11 puzzle, and I haven't really covered it in enough detail or gotten all the pieces because they've done a real good job covering it up and stuff. But definitely check out Enron, the biggest fraud in history, bro. It's huge, and it's all connected to 9/11, bro. It's hugely connected to 9/11. And if you don't understand that, and you're talking about the Mossad, then you're falling for disinformation. I'm sorry, but that's my perspective, and take it for what you will. Because you know, if we all agree on everything and keep, make this an echo chamber where we're all saying the same crap, we'll never get out of the bullshit disinformation circles that we're stuck in. So, amen to you guys. Keep doing the research and keep, keep thinking differently, thinking outside the box. All right, guys. So thanks, and we'll talk to you soon. And Happy New Year if I don't see you before then.